Good morning. It is really my pleasure and honor to be here in this gathering. Many thanks to the organizers for inviting me and giving me the chance to address you. And the organizers picked the address of my presentation. So I have a word of caution when they are talking about low oil price environment. We are talking about the present. About the future, of course, we have somebody from the Future Studies Institute, which is very reassuring that future can be studied. And we'll talk a little bit later about that. I will talk about these 6 points, and we will come to them. The first, I would like to introduce to you what is GPCA. GPCA is basically our industrial association within the Gulf. It is very similar to other associations. Our primary event, and all of you are more than welcome to attend, is the annual forum, and we have the presence of something like 2,000 industry leaders from all around the world. It is one of the main events of the chemicals and petrochemicals industry in the world today. The association focuses on two main activities: industry segments and on functional, and industry plastics and fertilizers, and functional we focus on supply chain, on health and environment, as well as international trade and research association. And obviously this is an industry association, so we have to be careful about antitrust. We don't encourage cooperation between our members in fields which is not acceptable, but it is more broad. These are small maps, and we have really almost everybody in the region in our ranks. And we have good support from all the main players because they appreciate what is going on and the value added from our industry. And I am sure many of your companies attended previous meetings, and I hope they will be also participating in future events. Among the issues which we focus on are basically networking, thought leadership, and advocacy, and these are the committees which we have. Now, let me go to the other subject about the rise of the petrochemical industry. And this is a very important issue, really. It is an issue which it has benefits to the whole world, not only our region. And it is also talk about the line of thinking which was prevailing before in the oil industry about what to do with the gas, the associated gas in a specific. And we will see here really a marvelous example of, we were talking yesterday a lot about green and being responsible, environmentally responsible. We talk about sustainability. And here you have a practical example of what people can do to affect that. The Gulf obviously is one of the largest oil producing regions in the world. And traditionally, all associated gas was flared. And those flares were among the worst flares you can dream of. You don't have only greenhouse gases, which is basically CO2. You have incomplete combustion. You have particulates, a lot of particulates, soot-like. And furthermore, those gases contained millions of tons of sulfur. So you have a multiple of that in terms of millions of tons of sulfur oxides emitted annually. Today, Saudi Arabia is one of the largest exporters of sulfur because basically we harness that resource for the benefit of industry worldwide, and we utilize it. and chemicals companies traditionally did not look to our region. Our region was not on the map. Yes, Pepsi Cola would like to sell their gaseous products in our markets. That's a good business. But in general, chemicals companies did not look at our region as a place where you produce chemicals. Because the line of thinking was go to large consuming regions. And our region was not a large consuming region at the time. So sometimes I coin the term of flying plane syndrome. People will only fly over our region, but will not take deep interest. And that was not to their advantage, neither to our advantage. So basically, the rise of our petrochemical industry resulted in harnessing flared gases, reducing pollution and greenhouse gases, turning wasted energy into petrochemicals, which is one marvelous thing. Millions, tens of millions of tons are produced today in our region and exported worldwide to the benefit of all humanity. And of course, economic growth and benefit to the region. And establishing of innovative capacity, I will come to that. This is just a simple chart showing all that beautiful energy which was wasted. However, with the petrochemical development and other economic development as well, all of that was turned into a value. Now, this is the production capacities and how they came up. And it was, frankly speaking, a beautiful story. And the growth was phenomenal. It is not as high today as it used to be, because basically most of the associated gas already captured, or already harnessed, already converted into petrochemicals. So the industry is still growing. It is growing also in volume and in sophistication and in diversity, but not at the same pace, historical pace, which you see here. Now, innovative capacity, really this was prepared by my colleagues in GPCA, and I have an issue with that. Many people equate building innovative capacity with building an R&D facility. And this is what this chart is talking about, how much we are spending today on R&D, and the region is already established many leading universities. Some of them are more or less dedicated research universities, and there are some also research centers. However, de facto, when you talk about innovation, innovation is not restricted to R&D and should not be equated with R&D. There was a study about a leading chemical company plants, but it is somewhat dated. They found that something like 70% of the innovation happens on the plant floors. And operators, technicians, engineers, process engineers, all of them will have a major influence on innovation in that industry. We coined in our industry the term, I am sure many of you are familiar with, about capacity creep. And if you look at the capacity creep in the chemical industry, it is marvelous. And most of that is not a result of R&D per se, but it is a result of process engineering, of utilizing more or less technology which is available, also of learning from your facility and your plant. So anytime you are moving an industry to a certain region, you are building a very substantial learning, and you are moving or establishing innovative capacity which can be very, very influential for the future development of that region. Obviously, if you complement that with R&D, that is marvelous, because if you would look for more fundamental improved innovation, if you look for more new things which you would like, not only the incremental innovation, Obviously, you cannot handle that without a sophisticated R&D facilities. Now, one additional thing which is happening to our industry is internationalization. So our industry is opening to the world. We understand we cannot live on our own, only isolated in our region. So we have today many, initially when we started, we had many joint ventures. We brought international players. They became our partners. And most of those partnerships are still there and thriving. Their capacity, their production capacities had multiplied, increased by multiples. And also in diversity. Nevertheless, our national industry is also moved out. And as, for example, you know, for example, the example of SABIC when they acquired GE Plastics, which is a worldwide operations, and there are many other examples. Now, being here in the middle of Europe and in the cradle of the chemical industry to a great extent, I mean, Germany was really very influential in the establishment of chemical industry as we understand it, especially the big three who started with industrial research back in the late 19th century, Hoechst, BASF, and the other company, Bayer. It is a real pity that the European petrochemical and chemical industry missed the chance of becoming an active player in our region, which is a pity. They did not look at our region. Maybe it is the flying plane syndrome, or whatever you would like to call it. Some exceptional examples were very exceptional. Enichem, at one time, with a mutual friend between us, he foresee the possibility of establishing MTBE in Saudi Arabia, and Ecofuel from Italy participated with also Neste from Finland with SABIC in the establishment of that project. An ex-senior executive in BASF who moved really from BASF to be the head of Basel had also foreseen the opportunity of investing in our region. However, our region in general did not see that much of attention from the European chemical industry. The main players were basically oil companies. And because they were looking for the oil, and this is another story, I will not take your time for it, but basically they found the benefit in the petrochemicals rather than in the oil. Of course, oil is extremely important for them, but from certain perspective. Now, let us talk about oil. Oil was known to humanity since very long time because it seeps to the ground. And there was many people think that the first oil well, the one which was drilled by Colonel Drake, or whatever his name, in accordance with the writer of the book of the prize, that he was not really even a colonel, but this is a detail. And however, really, the Chinese apparently were drilling for oil number of centuries before that time. So humanity knew of oil since quite some time, and the usage was mainly asphalt, medical, and lighting fuel. When I was doing this paper for you, I found some research papers indicating that kerosene or lighting fuel was already known for Islamic scientists back almost 1,000 years ago. And they were doing the distillation for the clear spirit to utilize it for clean lighting devices. Later on, obviously, oil started to be produced in the United States mainly, then in many other places in the world, Azerbaijan, and later Iran, and then the Arabian Gulf, and was started to be produced in huge quantities. And all of us remember the pictures of those fountains of oil, and where the drillers will be more or less will be swimming in oil, unless they will be burnt. Okay, kerosene and lighting was one of the first main products and main subject of trade. Internal combustion engine came around, and that required now not only physical separation of oil, but modification of the oil in order to go for something more, to enhance the octane, whatever. Then diversified usages and all around the world, and in petrochemicals. And this is, you can see the oil story for certain time, for almost the last 50 years. And oil is rising, and this is the OPEC production, which is also rising. It dropped as a percentage compared with the early days, but it is still very substantial, and it is rising now. And a substantial portion of the OPEC production is obviously coming from the Arabian Gulf. Now, as we are talking about low cost or low price environment of oil, let us take a look at oil prices. Historical oil prices had been fluctuating all the time. So really, when we talk about low price, high price, we have to be extremely careful. And I am sure people who are studying the future can provide a much better insight. I have to confess my ignorance in that area. And we will talk a little bit about it later on. And the oil price was, and is still most probably, and will continue to fluctuate in the future. And there are certain reasons. Oil had been always swinging between a glut and tight. And obviously, when you have a market swinging between a glut and tight conditions, obviously the price will respond to that situation. Now, why? One basic reason is the elasticity of supply-demand to prices on the short and medium term. On the long term, yes, you have the elasticity. The elasticity is there, and the prices will respond to the supply-demand situation. But on the short term, and even on the medium term, the elasticity is not that. It is not there to a great extent. So de facto, no stable prices without disciplined market player. Daniel Yergin, in his price book, which is really marvelous, and I think it is a very good history of oil for anybody who is interested in history rather than the future. But history is the key to future. Talks about a certain time when even in the United States, which really one of the strongest advocates of free markets and open markets, they had to assign a specific institution to put guards on the oil wells in Texas to limit the production of the oil wells rather than let the market be ruined. And they did not have any commission to handle that, and apparently it was assigned, I think, to Texas Railway Organization or something like that to control the production of oil, because at one time there were substantial production coming from Texas, and they discovered the new oil wells, I think, in California, and all of a sudden you have a glut, and you have to control it. So really, the market, the oil market, because of the low elasticity which we talked about, unless it is managed one way or another, it can lead to disasters either way. And it is not good for the humanity at large, because what you need oil is very critical, energy is very critical. You need more or less stability rather than huge fluctuations up and down. Now, coming to the oil and petrochemicals technology evolution, initially, as we talked, it was mainly distillation, and then there was continuous evaluation. All of a sudden, we started with cracking, with changing the molecule rather than just physical separation of the molecules. And the internal combustion engine came around, and this is not a typo. The demise of the electric car. Of course, we are seeing today a reversal of that, of the revival of the electric car, and maybe the demise of the internal combustion engine, it is too early to say anything about that, but basically today, for those who are fond of reading about history, it was a battle between Edison and the oil, Henry Ford, more or less, and ultimately the internal combustion engine prevailed, and the electric car more or less disappeared for the last few decades, 10 decades almost, but now we are seeing a reversal. And also, the chemical industry, and mainly in Europe, was based on coal and coal tar and products from the coal tar, and acetylene was the main building block for the chemical industry. All of that, with the coming of petrochemicals, all of that changed, and we had seen ethylene becoming the main building block for the petrochemical industry. Next to it is propylene. Then cracking of naphtha, of course, was the main product, the main process. Always we talk about crackers. This is our main working horse. Then today we are seeing more on-purpose technologies. Propane dihydro, things of this type are coming to. Now, this is just an outline of innovation in the oil industry. So many processes were developed. We are lucky we have a colleague from UOP, and I think they have more credit in this list than most of the other companies. Of course, I don't think they have the majority of credit, but they have most probably more than any other company in the development of technologies for the processing of oil and converting oil here and there to satisfy the requirements. One of the biggest challenges of refineries is how to balance your product, because basically oil is a mix of not one product, many elements in the oil, and then you need to tailor it to different usages, and that require a lot of technologies, a lot of innovation. Now, let us try to talk about the future a little bit. And word of caution, when we talk about the low price environment, we are talking about the present. The future, we leave it to the Future Studies Institute or somebody else. Now, what are the potential future directions, where technology is going? We are seeing more, refineries were already established basically to satisfy the fuel requirements. The fuel requirements was the most important element for the oil. And the refineries were basically designed for that main purpose. However, they found a cut which was not utilized, they could spare, which is naphtha, and that was basically the basic building block for the petrochemical industry. However, we are seeing today more and more of new processes. We are seeing new products, and we are seeing new usages, which is fascinating. I am not a polymer scientist, but I worked in polymers, and we produce many polymers. And from my exposure to polymers, I came to the belief that there is nothing which you can call it off-spec polymer. And there are many. At least by our industry jargon, we have to be careful, we have to adjust everything, and we have to produce the polymers based on a certain specs in order to be able to use them for certain applications. However, de facto, there is nothing in this world which you can call it off-spec polymer, provided two things. Provided that you can produce it consistently within certain parameters. And second, provided that you are clever enough, smart enough to know what to use it for. If you are smart enough to know that what this product is good for, bingo. Maybe you can sell it instead of $1,000 a ton, you can sell it for $5,000 a ton. But you have to know the properties of your polymer, because each polymer is unique. There are no two polymers equal, and de facto, almost no two batches in the production of polymers are exactly equal. We are seeing that future oil usage is going more to manufacturing than fuel. I will show you some data about that. And traditionally, refineries are more geared for fuel. We are seeing now a shift for more permanent usage. And this is the shift of the usage toward that. If you see here, this is, I hope the different colors are clear. This is the non-combusted usage of oil. And you see this is a fuel. And this is the increment on based a year by year or a certain time frame. And what you are seeing, it is almost peaked. And now you are seeing the fuel usage is going down. However, the non-combusted usage is going up. And for those who think that oil era is more or less over, this is showing the expected increase in oil based on for a certain time. So many of the forecasters will see that oil may peak around 2040 or around that time. Of course, that's future prediction, which we have to leave it to the Future Studies Institute. What we are seeing today, emergence of selective processes. For example, the propane dehydro. This is a fond project for my heart because the company I worked in, we established one of the largest plants in the world for the propane hydro. UOB has its own process also, competing with the process we utilized. And it was, I mean, two plants, I think, were built in Saudi Arabia based on their process as well. Conversion, now they are trying to more or less optimize. So this is, I mean, moving. So sometimes we are more or less in a straitjacket. If you have a cracker, if you have certain feedstock, you have a limited ability to move a product to produce either ethylene or propylene or butadiene in certain proportions. So however, people are developing now more processes to move one product from one side to the other side. So the meta-thesis is maximizing the propylene, for example, based on ethylene. And current processes are more or less based on cracking oil or cracking certain fraction of oil. Maybe sometime in the future, I mean, somebody will come with better fractionation of the different fractions of oil and take each fraction to more or less a specific usages instead of the wide brush which we have today. Take everything, crack it. The map of the petrochemical industry is quite complex, and I will show you an example of that. Innovative applications of existing or new products are still evolving. And as I gave you the example about a polymer, that there is nothing which you can call it really off-spec polymer. Produce it within a certain parameters, then be clever enough to know what it is good for. Bingo, you have a business. But that is easier said than done. Then petrochemicals are also, they are good for humanity. We are saving a lot of our natural resources because of petrochemicals. This is a simple map of the petrochemicals. Okay, this is a simple map of the petrochemicals produced in our region. So this is really very small portion of the map of petrochemicals, and it is quite complex. Now, how about the future? Will the low price environment continue? Will it end up tomorrow? Will it get worse or better, depending on your perspective? If you are oil producer or oil consumer, I don't know. However, I have a statement by a very famous physicist about the future, and I think it is clear to everybody. Prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. So I hope you very good luck. Thank you.